What's up, guys? Craig Mack here, Liberty Bell Beekeepers. Welcome back. So if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I'm a big fan of making my own boxes and my own equipment. The only thing I haven't started making yet is frames, and that is something I'm entertaining the possibility of doing in the future. But in our Northeast area, we deal with winter, and we have a lot of downtime in the winter. Probably November through, well, probably November through February, we're completely shut down. If we run late in our summer, sometimes we get those warm Octobers where you're still working with the bees. But usually by November, that's about done. And then it picks up again in March, and depending on March's weather, we get either slammed or we ease into it. Last year we got slammed with what was like just a switch from winter to spring. So this year looks like we're going to be gradually going into spring, which is giving me a little bit extra time to get stuff done. And right now, between boxes and swarm traps, I am working on queen cages. Now, queen cages are something we all use. And if you're like me and you sell queens, you certainly need them on hand all kinds of times. And I also use them during cutouts because I like to cage my queen for a couple of days after I bring her home, just to prevent her from taking off, because I've had them take off when I introduced them too soon, and it sucks. If you get a nice queen from a great cutout, you know, bees that you know been there and unmanaged for a while, you want to try to hold on to those queens, and losing them is not fun, but it happens. Building a queen cage and having the fondant and doing that whole thing is a nice way to kind of mitigate that risk and keep your queens in your boxes. So I'm going to show you my setup for this today. Now, I know not everybody's able to build stuff like this. I'm hoping that new beekeepers or beekeepers interested, or people interested in beekeeping, can realize that you really can do this stuff on your own. It's not that difficult. Most of us might have the tools to do this. If not, it's a reasonable expense to purchase these tools and be able to do some things on your own in your own home that you never thought you would be able to do, and really enjoy the fact that you were able to do them. So I like to show people that, and I think it's a huge part of my beekeeping experience, is that building this stuff brings a whole new level to it. You're proud of your accomplishment of not only building the box, but putting the bees in it and have the bees be successful, harvesting honey, gaining wax, all these things that as beekeepers we use and you know, cherish. It's an important part of what we do. So for me, building stuff is a great way to get involved, not only with something you might have never done, but also if you're uncomfortable doing it, you can meet new people that can do it for you and help you in your experience. I've certainly never hesitated to ask someone for help if I needed it. If they can help me, great. You'd be surprised what a little bit of honey does to people's willingness to help you. It helps you both, and they know it, and that's why they do it. So anyway, let's get on with it. So first off, I started, well, let me leave this here. First off, I started with some scrap material. I work in construction. I get scrap material all the time. This is some 1x12 primed that we used for shelving. So I had some cutoffs. Got about 5 or 6 of them. You might be able to see them there. And this is what I'm making my queen cages from. Now, I took one of these and laid it all out to see how many I could get. And once I've built my jigs, everything that I need to make these, the saws, the router, the drill, I don't need to lay this out on everything. I can just put my pieces in place, do the things that I need to do with them without having to mark every single one. Like I said, this was just for me counting out how many I could get. visually, as well as a little bit of boredom laying this all out. But either way, it was a good experience, because I think layout is, especially in my field, the most important part of the project. If you can't get yourself visually to a point before you even start to know what your finished product's going to be and the steps to get there, then, or at least most of the steps to get there, then you're already behind. You need to work on that more so than anything, in my opinion, and I'm sure that there's people that would agree. So I laid this all out in order to get a number of how many I could get out of here. So I got eight times, so I got 32 at a single piece of scrap 1x, 32 queen cages. I'm going to use, and as you can see, I used 1/8" hardware cloth on it, and I have that already. I purchased that, several rolls of that several years ago, and I still have it, and that's bought and paid for already with honey sales and removals and all that kind of stuff. So this project really is costing me nothing, and I'm guaranteeing you that if you find a construction site, you could get materials like this really, really easily. And asking people for them is not a bad thing either. Asking for their trash, they want to know why you want it, and then you can parlay that into, well, I'm a beekeeper, I'm making my stuff. Oh, you're a beekeeper? That sounds cool. Maybe they'll help. You really can go and get a lot of resources just by being honest and forthcoming with your purpose for something like this. It goes, I can't tell you how well it works because it's honest, and people respond to that honesty every single time. So I laid this out, and now I'm going to show you the cuts that are required and the jigs that I made to make these queen cages, and to be able to make them in mass to where I don't have to lay this board out every single time. I can just cut the material, place it in my jigs, place it on my saw, and come out with a beautiful finished queen cage. So we'll check back in with you when I get myself set up for the next shot. Okay, so one thing I wanted to point out with this material is it is 1x12, and this is a bonded material. It's not one single piece of wood that was cut out of one single tree. It's several smaller pieces that were put together. And if you can see, let's see if I can get this thing to focus here. There's definitely separations in the wood, in the material. You can see the two different slats. I don't know why this isn't focusing as nicely as it should, but maybe you can see it there. So I chose to cut this material down those lines and not across them, because I didn't want these boxes to have, separations where I felt like it, if you put it in your pocket, you could snap it in half. When I'm working along the grain, it just adds integrity to the wood. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, so the next part of this is probably the trickiest part. And it's only tricky for someone who doesn't have all the tools. Now, you can do this step a lot easier than I'm going to do it if you're only making a couple of them. Because I'm making so many, I want something permanent that I can just set and cut each piece the same way every single time and not have to worry about it. That's called a jig. If you're doing this on your own, you're only trying to make a few of these, you probably want to use something different. Now, what I would use is what is known, I don't have one sitting right here, is a Forstner bit. It's a, let me get one. Because I wasn't using it, but I wanted to show you guys. This is what's known as a Forstner bit. This will drill a perfectly round, straight hole down and in. Now this one has an extended point to get these things started, and most of them will. So you have to account for that when you're drilling into your material. As you can see, I have tape on this because at some point I was using that tape as a guide for how deep I was going to drill for the intended project at the time. So you might want to do that on this. If you're going to do this with a drill bit, you might want to mark out your depth on the bit itself. That way you know how deep to go. When you penetrate the material, you can stop where you need to stop and not drill all the way through. Because obviously this is only 3/4 of an inch and you're trying to drill about 75% of the way through it. So about 1/2 of an inch. So if I drill 1/2 of an inch, which is the width of this bit, I still have that other 1/4 inch point that goes almost to the bottom. So I generally stop this just before the edge of the bit there. And that provides plenty of room for the queen. She can move around in there, no problem. And it also prevents you from blowing out in the bottom. So you want to be careful if you're going to use that. And if you're only doing a few, make sure that this material is secured in something like a vise or it's clamped down, and that you take your time with the drill bit. Don't force it. Don't try to jam it in there, because you'll cause yourself more trouble. Go slow. All right. Now I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to do this with a router setup. Now this is just a clamped jig. It's nothing fancy. It's not something I'm going to keep past this experience tonight, because I can reset this easy enough that I don't have to worry about having it be some like permanent fixture in the shop. Eventually it might be nice to have a permanent fixture, a router table, but this was just a makeshift for this evening because I said, hey, let's make some queen cages in a video. So what I'm going to do with this material is, you can see it's marked out for roughly the centers. Now my saw and the layout were a little bit different. My blade's not quite 1/8 of an inch, and I laid this out for 1/8 of an inch. So you can see that part of that line still remains on the outside of this, but it's the width that I need it to be, which is 1 1/8 inches. Now I also laid out where I was going to start and stop my router bit to make the cavity inside of the cage. So that's what this block represents. I'll set this, I have this set to the appropriate depth. It's a 3/4 inch router bit. Now I would rather have had a rounded over 3/4 inch router bit because in order to make this cut, I have to move the material back and forth, keeping it tight against this guide, which is 3/4 MDFL, just made to act as a saw guide, in this case a router guide. Here I just have a 2x that I clamped into the appropriate depth, to where when I cut into this material, it will cut it to the line that I want it cut to, as you can maybe see from there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut one of these. I'm going to cut the video and come back. Hang on. I'm going to clear the dust, turn my router on. I don't know the RPMs, but it's a scale of 6, and it's only about 5, I believe. Eventually I'm going to turn this on, make this a switch. Much easier to operate. I'll have to set this material down and move it back and forth. This is my line. When I pull this back, that's my stopping point, this line. as you can see, after the router work, and there you see, I have myself a nice 3/4 inch cavity. Looks neat, looks clean. It does jump a little bit. As you can see, the one side is a little wider than the other. This isn't the bit that I would love to use. I wish I had a rounded over 3/4 inch bit. I just don't have one. So I'm using this one. And as you can see in here, there's some areas where the bit jumps a little bit. And that's just, you know, something that I could probably avoid if I moved a little bit slower, but it is what it is. Now we'll move over to the chop saw. So this part isn't exactly easy, but it's not too tricky either. It's just, again, something that if you're going to do this by hand, you got to do it secure. You got to make sure that your material is secure, either in a vise or clamped down to a table or in some kind of configuration that is comfortable to drive a drill and drill a hole through this material, because it's not very big. It's 1 1/8 by 3 inches and 3/4 of an inch thick. So once you get to this point, it's becoming a more delicate piece, and you have to treat it as such. But in my case, besides the hound dog barking in the background, I'm going to use my Smith machine. Now this Shopsmith is really cool. If you've never seen one of these machines or don't know anything about the Shopsmith, it was designed in the late 40s or 50s. I think it was in the late 40s that these were designed. And it's basically a machine that can do 100 different things and still fit comfortably in your garage in front of your car that you parked after you got done washing on Sunday. These were very popular for a number of reasons, and they're super versatile. I bought it because at one point I needed it, or I was going to use it for a lathe, but I ended up getting a different lathe, and this wasn't the best lathe, although it's a decent lathe if you have the right parts for it. I wanted it more for the drill press capabilities, for the bandsaw, and also for the joiner planer. So I also have a circular saw attachment. It does a whole bunch of things. It's really a great machine. If you like machines, not everybody finds them convenient or fun because you got to change the parts and do all that stuff on them. But if you like machines, it's a cool machine. It really is. You got to appreciate everything that it can do, and all American made, beautiful, beautiful thing. So again, I set up myself a jig here with a piece of plywood, another block of 2x, so I could set my queen cage into this and horizontally drill a 3/8 hole straight through this box. Oh, I gotta plug. Guess it would help if I plugged it in. The only thing I had to do to this machine was replace the plug, but they do require maintenance. You got to clean them and grease them and all that kind of stuff, which is a lot of fun. So I'm going to go on my Shopsmith, lowest setting. It doesn't have to be ultra fast, nice and easy. Fortunately, this has this nice handle on the side here that will allow me to drill this nice and easily. So I can hold this down, move my drill through it nice and easy, nice and slow. You can see it comes through the box and out the other end and into my plywood. That way I get a nice clean cut all the way through. Boom. Runs right along the bottom of the box. Nice and easy for the queen to get in and out, although they don't have any trouble either way. And you can see it's not quite centered. It's a little bit low, but that's so, like I said, I wanted that to be as close to the bottom of the box as possible. A nice straight walkthrough. So next and final step, apart from putting cork or candy in it, is the screen process. Now I had a bunch of screen. I got rolls of this stuff laying all over the place. Now what I do with this is I don't cut this screen into 1,000 pieces that are the size of this box. I just cut a square out or a rectangle that's approximately the same width, the 3 inches, and then I just staple it on and cut it right off the box. Okay, so this part is another one that's a little bit, I don't know, unique, but it might be something for some of you guys that out there that do this a lot or use this 1/8-inch hardware cloth. But I love this. This is an upholstery stapler. It's a fine wire stapler, meaning it's not like a heavy duty, construction staple. It's more like an office staple, except it comes out of a pneumatic gun. And it is technically called an upholstery stapler, and it works fantastic for upholstery, and that's why I bought it. For upholstery and foam work, it just so happens to work for lots of other things like insulation, tar paper, underlayment paper, shooting screen on the queen cages. I mean, I love this thing. It's great. I'm so happy that I purchased it, and I've used it so many times. I'm surprised it's still working. So one thing you got to watch out for, these are a 1/4-inch leg staple, so they're not going to go very deep, but I don't want to fire a staple into the entry holes on either side. So I'm gonna fire it diagonally in the corners here. And then because we used a 3/4-inch bit, there's enough meat in this fine wire stapler to throw a staple on either side. Nice and easy. I got a set of these big old snips that don't work really great for anything, but they work great for screen. And that's it. Queen cage ready to go. Like I said, I'm making a bunch of these, so I set up all this equipment. I set up all these jigs with the intention to make, a couple hundred of them at a time. And not everybody's going to do that and spend this much time, but you can make these very simply and very easily with a screw gun and a chop saw. It can and is very, very easy to do. A little bit of brain power, laying stuff out on a material, you can get a lot done out of a free piece of wood. Queen cages. Hope you enjoyed the video. It's a new one for me, teaching people how to do this stuff, but I do this stuff all the time, and I am a lead carpenter, and I train people all the time too. So I hope you enjoyed it, and it was a worthwhile excursion into my beekeeping process, and maybe a little bit further peek into what beekeepers go through in the wintertime, especially one like me that's just me and trying to become something that's more than just me. So thanks a lot for watching. As always, I appreciate everything. Hope everybody's doing well, and get after them. Get after them bees this year. Thanks a lot, guys.